Hello viewers, welcome to the Concept of the Day series. Today, as part of the Concept of the Day, we are discussing in polity there is an important topic called ordinance-making powers. So these powers are given to the President and Governor by the Constitution of India. So we'll discuss in detail in what are the most important provisions one need to know from examination point of view regarding ordinance-making powers. We'll discuss in this video. So without any further delay, let's start. So first, what is ordinance-making power? Right? So in India, we know there is a clear separation of powers between three different organs by the Constitution. So legislature has the main job of legislating the laws or enacting the laws. But in some situations, when legislature is not in a position to enact the laws, or when there is a dire need or urgent need, then executives sometimes can make the laws instead of legislature. So that capacity is given to the President of India and governors in the form of ordinance making powers, right? So that means when legislature, that means it is either the Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, either if one of them is not in session or if both of the houses are also not in session, then it is empowered by the Constitution to the President of India and the Governor. They can enact ordinances. So according to Constitution, 123 article talks about the ordinance making powers of the President of India, and governors do make ordinances on Article 213, right? So first, this is what you have to understand. And do remember, this is not their discretionary power. Not discretionary power means they cannot take their decision on their own. That means they have to align with the advice of Council of Ministers. Only if the Council of Ministers suggests that there is a need for bringing an ordinance with when an emergency situation arises and the houses are not in session, then only President or Governor can promulgate any ordinance, right? So then on what subjects they can legislate? That means, so here President can enact ordinances on the matters mentioned in the union list, right? So that is what the President has the power. And same is the case with the governors. So governors can generally enact the matters on the matters related to the state list with respect to the state ordinances which governor can issue. Then when they can issue, we have discussed. When they can issue means when either of the houses not in session or both the houses are not in session. You have to keep in mind, if both houses are in session and any ordinance issued will be null and void. So it cannot be any valid ground for issuing the ordinance. Then how much is the lifetime of an ordinance? So generally 6 weeks is the time. That means within 6 weeks of promulgation of the ordinance, it has to be approved. But in case if there is a gap, maximum gap between two sessions allowed by the Constitution is 6 months. So if there is a 6 months gap, then 6 weeks after the reassemble of that particular house, they have to pass. Otherwise, if none of the houses passes or only if one house has passed and another house did not pass, then also it can be a ground for cancellation of that particular ordinance. On what matters generally we can enact ordinance? So ordinance can be issued to amend another ordinance also. You can amend another ordinance. You can amend any parliament law. You can amend any tax law also, right? You can amend any tax law. And remember, you cannot amend the Constitution using an ordinance, right? So this is the most important thing. So any ordinance cannot be issued for amending the Constitution. That is the main important point you have to keep in mind, right? So then coming to other powers related to ordinance making powers of the President or the Governor, here we have to keep one thing in mind is ordinance making powers. Right? So it has some advantages and disadvantages also. So when you talk about the advantages, so when there is a dire need or urgent need and the houses are not in session, so you can bring an ordinance, right? So that is one thing. That means when we wanted to satisfy the public and their needs and demands accordingly, that is one thing. And in some emergency situations also, we can issue some ordinance, right? But what are the drawbacks of this power, right? So if you see, the main thing here we have to keep in mind is ordinance making power is a clear violation of separation of powers, right? So violation of separation of powers. So this is one we have to keep in mind, because under the Constitution, legislature only has the power to enact the laws, but executive is also getting the power. So this is a violation of separation of powers. At the same time, most of the times what happens is any ordinance passed will have the lifetime, like you can say, it also will extend to the parallel power of the parliament in terms of legislative aspects. But sometimes what happens is, most of the times parliament will, like executive we can say precisely. So when they think like any parliament law cannot be easily passed, they'll issue ordinances. That means it is not like a bypassing of parliamentary power of legislation. You cannot use an ordinance to bypass any parliamentary power of legislation. At the same time, we also have to keep in mind repromulgation of same ordinance. Repromulgation of same ordinance. That means once after the 6 months or 6 weeks of time, and again if you're repassing the ordinance, because you definitely know that that bill will not be passed in the legislature, then repromulgation of ordinance is unconstitutional according to Supreme Court. So this was said in Desi Vadwa case. So Desi Vadwa versus State of Bihar case. So almost here in this particular case, an ordinance was repromulgated 16 times. So it is like a bypassing of parliamentary authority or the state legislative authority. So that is why repromulgation of ordinance is said to be unconstitutional according to this particular case. At the same time, there is also an important case regarding ordinance is R.C. Cooper case. So in R.C. Cooper case, so the decision of the president, in case if they feel it is malefied or with bad intention he has brought that ordinance, then also that can be checked by the courts. That is what the judgment given in R.C. Cooper versus Union of India case. Then here we also need to talk about one important concept called doctrine of colorable legislation. So this also applies in this particular concept. What is doctrine of colorable legislation? So parliament or legislatures generally will have some powers. Only within that limits they have to ensure that they are exercising those purpose. But sometimes if law is or constitution is not allowing to make not allowing any parliament to make law on one particular matter, means it cannot do it indirectly. Indirectly means through an ordinance. For example, if parliament is not having power to bring any particular law, then it cannot be done indirectly. So that is nothing but doctrine of colorable legislation. So this is also an important thing which you need to keep in mind with respect to ordinance and related provisions. So let us see the practice question. Consider the following statements regarding the ordinance making parts of the President of India. So 3 statements were given and options were given. So please find the correct option and then let me know in the comment section. So today, as part of the concept of the day series, we have discussed about the ordinance making parts of the president as well as governor. So what is the doctrine of colorable legislation? In which situations we can bring an ordinance? In what situations we cannot bring an ordinance? All this we have discussed in a concept of the day series. So due to some reasons I couldn't continue, but from tomorrow we'll be having continuous concept of the day series. Please, if you want any other topics also, you can put your suggestions in the comment section. I'll definitely try to address as soon as possible. I wish you all the very best. Thank you.